Happy Pride, everyone! I know that we're pretty late into the month here, but I still wanted to do something on the channel to celebrate. So today we are going to be talking about movies that are secretly more LGBT plus friendly than they first appear. We'll be focusing on thematic elements and allegories, as well as some interesting details within the films that speak in some way to the LGBT experience. Some of these were intentional, though most of them were not, but we'll talk about some of the specifics of each example as we get to them. So if you're just looking for a more queer reading of some popular cinema, or you're just looking for movies to relate to that you can't openly watch or love due to being closeted, I got you with these recommendations. So the really interesting thing about the X-Men is that they were originally written to be an allegory for racism, and they were inspired by several civil rights activists at the time that they were written. Now, the race parallels are definitely still there, but I honestly think that the LGBT comparisons work much better. For one, mutants can be born anywhere and to anybody. There's not really a commonality in physical appearance to them, and often the mutants are born to otherwise completely normal parents. It's not really a long-standing generational issue being faced. They also establish in the opening scene of the first X-Men movie that for a lot of mutants, their powers develop first during puberty, which is also when a lot of LGBT kids first start to explore their sexuality and their identity, and it's when they start to come more into themselves. Though there are also those who know from a younger age or find out later in life. In-universe, there is an established fear and shame amongst the population of the mutants because they're something relatively new and different. Or at the very least, they are just more visible now because, as we are shown, mutants have actually existed for a very long time canonically. Parents often don't know or are even scared and ashamed of their mutant children and are desperate to look for solutions, which for some come in the form of Professor X, but we also see the less than savory, more religious homes that abuse these kids. We also see the concept that these people can be cured of their mutant powers. That's a very big plot element of the third X-Men movie. And we establish that at least some parts of the religious communities see mutants as a type of perversion against God. But luckily, at least, we also see positive communities of these mutants coming together to help and mentor the younger generation and make the world a better and safer place for them, advocating for their rights in our modern world. Basically, the X-Men, much more LGBT in nature than a race allegory. You know, it's kind of funny, I had a really big fascination with the X-Men when I was a younger teen. I couldn't really explain it. I loved all of the movies, even the bad ones. It might make a little bit more sense now. Harry Potter is literally about a kid who is forced to live in a closet by his family who hates what he was born, and they constantly treat him like crap because of it. It's almost not even subtle. But even deeper than that, we have the secret wizarding world that is kept away from the Muggle world due, at least in part to, you guessed it, fear on the parts of the Muggles. And while it is not a major theme in the original books or films, it does pop up more in the Fantastic Beasts series. But witchcraft and magic is usually feared and seen as the devil's work by the traditional religious communities. So the struggles of the wizards relate to that part of the LGBT experience. And within the secret wizarding world, you get a culture of people who dress fly as fuck, and honestly, pretty flamboyantly compared to what we're used to seeing. And even individuals who can transform their body at will, or use potions to appear to be someone else whenever they want. Yeah, fuck you, JK. You incidentally wrote metaphorical trans representation into your books, and I'm reclaiming it from you.
Fuck JK Rowling. All my homies hate JK Rowling.
I think the important morals here is that there is a reason Harry Potter is popular amongst a lot of the alphabet mafia, and J.K. Rowling is much better at incidental representation than when she tries. Because wow, she is really bad when she tries. Edward looks like he walked straight out of a Hot Topic or from the band kid table, and this is contrasted with the setting of an exaggerated, picturesque image of suburban America, where Edward kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. And Edward initially is treated politely enough by most, though there is one particular religious fanatic who is not keen on him. See the previous notes we've made about religious fanaticism and fearfulness of the gays. But even when people try to act nice towards him, you can still sort of tell that it's more out of expected politeness or them thinking thinking that they can gain something from Edward, rather than a true acceptance, and there is some sort of tension on the part of the residents, where if Edward acts too far out of line, he will just be dropped like a hot sack of potatoes, which, given Edward's overall naivety and the nature of his physical form, happens eventually, and he is outcasted from the town. That can be the experience of a lot of LGBT people. It is not always an outright hatred. Sometimes it's more of an awareness that you're walking on a tightrope around those who live the more expected life, and you just know that you're looked at and thought of differently. Even if everyone is acting nice or polite enough, you just know that you do something too strange for their taste and you're no longer treated kindly, or given any sort of benefit of the doubt, and you're run out of their ideal life. I like that about the movie. It is simultaneously very exaggerated in its imagery, but often a lot more subtle in its messages and commentary. The Matrix has gotta be the most popular movie directed by the Wachowski sisters. Yes, that is right, sisters. The title card that you see here is outdated. Both of the directors are trans women, and Lana Wachowski has confirmed that the Matrix series is an allegory for being trans. This makes it my favorite example on this list by far, given the whole red pill and waking up into reality is often used by the more right-wing anti-trans types, and they are essentially telling people to take a metaphorical estrogen pill. Irony sure is sweet, isn't it? Honestly, Lana revealing this does make a lot of sense with what we see in the films. We see society within the Matrix as governed and strictly run by the likes of Agent Smith, and they very clearly do not like anybody who threatens that system or individuals who can operate outside of it. It's not at all a stretch to subscribe this to our societal ideas about gender roles and sexuality, and the expectations placed on individuals to conform to that and to not question it. But once a person does choose to wake up and see the truth, they can have a hard and tumultuous journey ahead of them, having to rebuild their body and live in secrecy and on the run from those who want them under their control or dead, a la the machines. Neo is such a threat to them because he can operate outside of that system. He realizes that
there is no spoon.
There is no spoon?
there is no reason he or anybody else really has to conform to the rules that have been placed on them, and Neo wants to expose this truth. The foundation of the Matrix relies on people to not realize this, as doing so threatens the machine's power, and even the movies acknowledge that there will be individuals who are more content to stay within the roles laid out for them. But our heroes are not concerned with completely destroying the Matrix. They're more concerned that people are simply allowed to make the choice to stay or go rather than simply being forced. I loved The Matrix before, thinking it was just a great action movie. Now I love it even more knowing that it is both a great action movie and an amazing trans metaphor. I call this next segment Disney is better at LGBT representation when they aren't trying. Now, a lot of people have criticized Disney for being absolute cowards on LGBT rep and pandering to the community only when there is money to be made off of it in the LGBT friendly countries, but completely ignoring them and actively avoiding them when creating products that they want to market and make money off of the less than friendly countries. And we should continue to give them shit for it. Relentlessly. But that doesn't mean that we can't extract some themes out of them that speak to the gays. Lindsay Ellis made a really good video going on a deeper dive into The Little Mermaid, and her video is definitely an inspiration for this part. I would check it out. But Ariel's only want in life is that she wants to be human and live in the human world. You could say she feels as if she were born in the wrong body. She secretly collects her trinkets and hides them, doting on them whenever she can, and when her father finds out about her dirty little secret, he flips shit and destroys it all. Him falling firmly in the "you need to stop with these childish fantasies and realize that you were born this way and you belong this way" category. But Ariel believes the opposite so firmly that she is willing to give up a part of herself to get her legs. Almost like a type of metaphorical bottom surgery. I know that you still have the love story with Eric thrown in there, kind of compulsory for a Disney movie of that era. But she wanted to be a human before she ever met him. Eric was more of a way for her to get what she had always wanted permanently. Even more interesting is when you learn that the original story's author, Hans Christian Andersen, had several several unsent love letters to another man, and that the original version of The Little Mermaid had a much deeper theme of unrequited love that you can't possibly have. And of course still had the theme of desperately wishing to live in a different world. Pretty neat. Also Ursula, just Ursula, a literal drag icon. Girl with magic powers that she has to keep a secret due to an aversion from the general population fearing what she is? Yeah, that's pretty gay. Kind of like how we talked earlier with Harry Potter and there being mentions of hating witchcraft that we know to be a largely religious phenomenon. That happens in Frozen too. So yeah, witchcraft scares the religious crowd, as do the L's, G's, B's, and T's. Once Elsa is effectively outed by accident, she runs in shame and feels that she can only be herself once she is far away from where people were averse to her. Feels very reminiscent of somebody leaving a small conservative town to discover themselves more. Even the freeze that befalls Arendelle that Elsa causes can speak to the negative consequences that can be wrought upon a society when marginalized individuals are rejected and made to be afraid of themselves and treated as second-class citizens. Now, it's not a perfect analogy given that Elsa herself was still technically the cause of this, but I guess it's not going to be one-to-one in an allegory. The basic idea is still there. Now, Luca is sort of what happens if you combine The Little Mermaid and Frozen into one entity. It's the story of a young boy who wants to explore the world around him, or more above him, but he has to keep a secret that could very easily result in his death if discovered, and it almost does at several points in the film. The sea creatures are so demonized by the townfolk to the point of bloodlust for them. The sea creatures and townfolk live in perpetual fear of one another, and it stems pretty much purely from a complete lack of understanding in the culture of the townspeople. Even though unbeknownst to them, the so-called monsters can appear and act just like anyone else, and even secretly live among them, as we learn later in the film. The parents of the sea children are so terrified of what these people might do to their kids that they're even willing to send them away to do what they think will keep them safe. If that's not all a queer metaphor, I don't know what is. And I do know that the director of Luca has said that it was not intentionally meant to be representative of a queer experience, but he is happy that people can see themselves in the movie. Even at the end of the film, where Luca and Alberto have been accepted by the townsfolk, the movie is still self-aware enough to not act like it's always going to be sunshine and rainbows.
Perfect. Well, they'll never accept him. But some will. And he seems to know how to find the good ones.
Granny's speaking straight to the gay soul with that one. This might be the most obvious one on the list, but any chance I can get to talk about Mulan is one that I will take. Mulan completely smashes her cultural ideas of gender roles and has no issue dressing and portraying herself as a man. Also, Reflection is literally the trans mask anthem. Have you ever listened to those lyrics? Mulan is and stays a woman through the whole time, but she blends the gender barriers in presentation. Gender fluid would probably be the most apt analogy, but any type of trans or gender non-conforming person can get something out of it. Also, we have bisexual icon Shang Li. You cannot look at this scene right here and convince me that this man is not in love with who he thinks is also a man. You know, this is the third movie on this list that I loved a ton as a younger person. I honestly probably should have realized certain things about myself a lot quicker than when I did. In the Inside Out universe, every person is portrayed as having 5 different emotions that control one's actions and govern their feelings. We spend most of the film seeing the emotions of Riley, a young preteen girl. Maybe. Well, here's the thing about that. There are times we see inside the minds of various other characters, and in every other character's case, all of the emotions are the same gender as the character themselves. The mom has all female emotions, the dad all male emotions, Riley's crush that we see at the end of the film also has all male emotions. But Riley is unique in that they have mixed gendered emotions. Was this probably done because they didn't want to have a single gendered main cast for the film, because they thought that an all male or an all female cast wasn't very marketing friendly, and they just made the emotions of other characters have the physical traits of their host as a bit of a visual gag? Honestly, yeah, that's probably the real answer of what went on behind the scenes, but regardless of that, They made the scenario we see canon, so Riley is canonically the only person we see who has an internal voice with both male and female voices. This suggests some form of gender fluidity, nonconformity, or some other type of trans representation in the form of Riley, who is just not yet fully aware of this. It's more something that the audience knows due to being able to see their internal thoughts. Honestly, they will never do it, but God, imagine if they made a sequel of Riley discovering that they are trans and how the emotions have to go through and handle all of that. It sounds like it could be so good, but it's not happening. Not anytime soon, at least. Maybe it's time that I got to writing.